The coffee was still warm when Annie Lawson vanished at the Rivergate port in Portland, Oregon. Population 108,451. On the night of October 1945, rain fell heavily on the Willamette River, a cold wind from the docks blowing through the silent streets. At 9:15 p.m., her neighbor, Mrs. Helen Ward, saw Annie, a 21-year-old nursing student, driving her black Ford Sedan away from the boarding house on Lombard Street, holding a cup of hot coffee. She said she would stop at the Texaco gas station near the St. John's Bridge before heading home. The car turned into the lane leading to the riverbank, its red taillights fading gradually into the thick gray rain. That was the last time anyone saw Annie Lawson alive, and what happened in the next few hours would haunt Portland for nearly 60 years afterward. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Portland in 1945 was a city in transition after the war. The docks along the Willamette River were still cluttered with undischarged military supply crates, and the paved roads around the St. John's area bore the marks of hasty industrialization. The autumn air was damp and cold, with mist from the river seeping through the trees and casting a haze over the faint neon signs. In the quiet residential neighborhoods, people tried to return to normal life, but a sense of unease lingered behind closed doors. In the northern part of the city, a small boarding house near the Portland Nursing School was home to 21-year-old Annie Lawson, a senior student. She lived with a classmate and worked evening shifts at a diner near the port to cover tuition. Annie was known to many as gentle, punctual, and always returning home after each shift. She had neatly tied brown hair, often wore a thick gray coat, and drove an old black Ford Sedan left by her father before he died in the war. That evening, Portland had light rain, slippery roads, and streetlights casting dim reflections on puddles. After the diner closed, Annie cleaned the counter, said goodbye to her colleagues, and drove off as usual. A few people said she stopped at the Texaco gas station at the foot of the St. John's Bridge to fill up before heading home. The station was near Rivergate Road, where drivers and port workers often passed late. The night shift attendant recalled that the young woman seemed to talk to a man in a military coat, looking like a recently discharged soldier. The exchange was brief, not loud, and drew no attention. Afterward, the black Ford left the station, heading south, disappearing into the thin fog and patchy lights on the wet road. The night passed quietly, but by morning, Annie's roommate realized she hadn't returned. The bed was still made, the room door locked, her purse and spare coat untouched. The roommate tried calling the diner, but the manager said Annie had left the previous evening. No one in the boarding house saw her come back. By morning, her mother, Mrs. Margaret Lawson, received the news and immediately went around the neighborhood asking questions, then drove to the port area where her daughter worked, but found no clues. When all search possibilities proved fruitless, she and a close family friend went straight to the Portland City Police Department to report her missing. The report was logged in the duty book like any other routine case, but for the Lawson family, it marked the beginning of a long chain of uncertain days. While Portland continued its daily rhythm with ship horns and the clanging of metal from the shipyards, a young woman of the city had vanished without a trace, leaving behind an empty boarding room and unanswered questions. Annie Lawson's missing person file was opened that same afternoon at the Portland Police Department. Inspector Frank Morales, who headed the unit investigating cases involving women and youth, was the first to receive the report. Morales, 43 years old, had served in the military before joining the police force and had a habit of meticulously noting every detail in his leather notebook. He met the victim's mother, Mrs. Margaret Lawson, in the small public reception room on the ground floor. She recounted the morning's search efforts, her voice trembling, hands still clutching a photo of her daughter in her nursing uniform. Morales asked a few short questions, requesting the address of Annie's boarding house, her school, her part-time job, and close acquaintances. He made no promises, only saying he would check everything from the start. The file was assigned case number 45103L, noted, female, white, 21 years old, 5'4" tall, brown hair, missing under unclear circumstances. Initially, Morales went to the boarding house where Annie lived in northern St. John's. Her roommate, Mary O'Brien, opened the door in a state of panic. The small room had only 2 beds, a shared study desk, and a wardrobe. Annie's belongings were untouched, with no signs of packing to leave. In the desk drawer, Morales found her class schedule, clinical nursing notes, and a few unpaid electric bills. Mary said that the previous evening, Annie left the diner at her usual time, saying she would fill up at the gas station and then head home. She had no boyfriend, rarely went out at night, and hadn't mentioned leaving the city. According to her friend, Annie was very afraid of traveling far in the dark, especially after the assault cases around the river docks that the newspapers had reported. Morales recorded the entire statement and asked Mary to list the names of her shift colleagues. After leaving the boarding house, he went to the diner where Annie worked. The owner, Mr. Peter Hall, confirmed she clocked out around 9, still in uniform, carrying her purse. Hall said Annie was a reliable employee who never called in sick unexpectedly. No one in the diner noticed which direction she turned after leaving, as it was still busy with customers at that time. Morales asked Mr. Hall to check the night sales receipts to confirm the exact departure time. Everything was copied into the record and attached to the file. The next stop was the Texaco gas station at the foot of the St. John's Bridge. The station had only 2 fuel pumps and a small coffee counter. The night attendant, Edward Grant, immediately recognized the photo Morales showed. He remembered the young woman coming the previous evening, driving a black Ford, filling up, and asking for directions to the boarding house area. Grant said he saw a man in a military coat standing nearby, smoking, seemingly acquainted with the girl, since they exchanged a few short words. However, he didn't hear the content. When Morales pressed for more details, Grant could only describe vaguely. The man was tall, dark-skinned, black hair with a southern accent. Morales requested a sketch of the pump positions, the car's stopping direction, and the departure direction. All information was recorded in the case log, signed by the station employee. Back at the station, Morales compiled the data sources. From the statements, he mapped Annie's route, leaving the diner in central St. John's, heading toward the bridge, stopping for gas at Texaco, then continuing south to the boarding house. The distance was only about 3 miles, taking no more than 15 minutes if driving straight. However, she never reached her destination. In his notebook, Morales wrote a short line. Missing within city limits, no contact, no luggage, no clear personal conflicts. He requested the central office to review records of missing persons or assaults on women in the area over the past 2 months for overlaps. At the same time, a missing person notice was sent to all North City police stations and hospitals. As the afternoon passed, Morales continued cross-referencing the personal file provided by the family, academic records, school friends, recent letters. No signs of financial trouble, no personal conflicts, no plans to leave Portland. Everything pointed to the young woman disappearing suddenly on her familiar nightly route. In his initial report to superiors, Morales concluded, no evidence suggesting the victim left voluntarily. The situation should be treated as a missing person case with unusual factors. The morning after the initial investigation report was completed, the Portland Police Department launched a wide-area search around the location where Annie Lawson was last seen. Inspector Frank Morales directly commanded. A team of 8, including local police, 2 veteran volunteer staff, and a K-9 unit, was mobilized. The St. John's area map was spread out on the desk, and Morales used a red pen to circle a 3-mile radius from the Texaco gas station. This area included the St. John's Bridge, the Riverside Road along the Willamette, small docks, and part of the northern residential zone. He ordered thorough checks of paths leading to the water's edge and empty lots around warehouses, as those were places where evidence could easily be hidden if an incident occurred. By noon, the search team set out. The weather was unfavorable. Thick clouds, light rain, strong wind from the river, reducing visibility. Along Rivergate Road, rainwater mixed with vehicle oil formed shiny black streaks. Heavy cargo trucks passed, their wheels churning mud and making the sweep more difficult. The first police group headed downstream, checking every path to the water's edge. They looked for tire tracks, metal fragments, personal items, or anything that might belong to Annie. Morales accompanied the dive team leader, noting each stop in his book. Everything was just drifting trash and a few old tire marks of undetermined age. At the head of the St. John's Bridge, 2 other officers checked bus stops and cargo lots. They questioned night shift guards, but no one saw a black Ford Sedan pass or stop. A ferry driver said he saw car headlights reflecting on the water the night of the disappearance, but couldn't confirm the color or direction. The note was added to the file, but there was no physical evidence to cross-reference. The third police team swept the nearby residential area, knocking on doors to ask if anyone saw anything unusual. Most residents said they heard nothing beyond the usual truck noises and ship horns at night. By afternoon, Morales moved the search team south to the Rivergate port area. There were many warehouses and timber yards, with soft ground that easily showed tire tracks. Police checked every gap between cargo crates, shining lights to the dock edges, but found only murky water and rotten planks. One officer discovered a long scratch on the nearby concrete, seemingly from something heavy being dragged, but rain had washed away all traces. Morales noted the coordinates and requested photos for the file. He also contacted the River Patrol office to monitor along the river in case of an accident. As dusk fell, the dive team returned reporting no underwater findings. All they found was industrial debris and old netting. Morales decided to end the first search day, gathering the team at the Texaco John's station to compile results. The report noted no vehicle, no signs of traffic collision, no personal items identified as Annie Lawson's. He ordered the Rivergate dock area preserved under special monitoring and continued seeking new witnesses who might provide information about the black Ford. Over the next day, units handling different areas continued sweeps. One team checked parking lots near the train station. Another reviewed lists of abandoned or accident vehicles within a week. All results were negative. Morales believed if there was criminal activity, the perpetrator might have moved the vehicle elsewhere or hidden it in the Riverside Industrial Zone. He requested neighboring police stations to report any old Ford with the Lawson family license plate. 3 days passed, and the search still yielded no results. Local media began running short articles about the disappearance, but most residents thought it was just a case of getting lost or leaving voluntarily. Morales, based on the file and statements, did not believe that theory. In his report to superiors, he clearly stated the victim had no financial, psychological, or personal reasons to leave. She had no boyfriend, no debts, no criminal record, and a stable life. The disappearance occurred on a short route, only in a familiar area. At the end of the first weekend after Annie went missing, Morales completed the Phase 1 summary. He described the search process, listed checked locations, interviewed witnesses, and areas needing continued monitoring. The file was officially coded, Case 45-103 Lawson, Missing Person. This was no longer a temporary report, but an official case in the Portland Police Department system. Morales submitted the file at the end of the day, closed his notebook, and looked out the rain-streaked window where the St. John's Bridge lights reflected on the dark river. The next search would have to expand, but on that first day, all police efforts yielded only the heavy silence of the city. 2 days after the official file was opened, the search still produced no specific results. Reports from patrol teams repeated the same conclusion: no vehicle signs, no new witnesses, no evidence matching Annie Lawson's description or the black Ford sedan. Police contacted all city hospitals, including Portland General, St. Vincent, and Providence, requesting verification of emergency patient lists over the past 2 nights. No facility recorded anyone matching the identifiers. Train stations, bus depots, and ferry docks were checked. Shift staff all confirmed not seeing the young woman or the vehicle with the Lawson family plate. Morales requested additional checks at area police stations in case someone reported a minor accident or abandoned vehicle, but results remained empty. On the morning of the third day, as the previous night's rain had just stopped, the central office received a call from a man named Samuel Pratt, a cargo handler at the Rivergate dock. Pratt said that on the night Annie disappeared, he was on the late shift and saw a black car parked near the western timber storage area by the river. When asked for details, he said the car was parked for about half an hour, then left, but he didn't remember the plate because it was dark and foggy. He was only sure it was an old four-door model, very similar to a Ford. This statement was forwarded to Morales that morning. He immediately went to meet Pratt at the dock. The man led him to the area where he saw the car, pointing to the damp, low concrete where oil-water streaks still glistened. Morales examined the surroundings, measured the distance from the main road to the river's edge, and noted the location on the map. Although no new physical traces were found, Pratt's statement made him believe this could be the last place Annie's car appeared. Police intensified the search in this area. 3 officers were sent to recheck all nearby warehouses, questioning night shift workers. Most said they heard no unusual noises, only ship engines and wind. Another worker remembered someone dropping a flashlight near the dock that night, but no one claimed it, and the item was later not found. Morales ordered a 100-meter radius circle around Pratt's indicated spot, requesting the dive team to return and check the deep water near the shore, but the river current was strong, with near-zero underwater visibility. The dive team report stated, "No large objects detected, soft mud bottom, easily disturbed." By the end of the day, Morales sat reviewing all data. The victim's travel route was clearly established, but all traces seemed to end at the Rivergate dock. No one saw her leave, no one found the car. Meanwhile, the Lawson family continued coming to the police station every morning for updates. Mrs. Margaret brought her daughter's photo and suggested police distribute flyers at markets, schools, and bus depots. Morales agreed, directing the office to print over 300 notices with the photo, physical description, and license plate, distributing them to patrol police and posting in residential areas. Local media began running short articles about the case. A blurb in the Oregonian described Annie Lawson as a nursing student missing under undetermined circumstances. Though small and on a back page, it drew attention from many in the St. John's area. Several calls to the police reported seeing an old black car heading south, but upon checking, all were mistaken reports. Morales carefully retained each report, but he understood that after 4 days, the chances of finding her alive were rapidly diminishing. The next morning, he set up a large diagram in the office, pinning key points with red tacks: the diner, Texaco gas station, boarding house, Rivergate dock. The final arrow stopped at the river's edge, where Pratt's statement pointed. The investigation team members noted Annie's journey ended in a very narrow range, less than 4 kilometers, but no physical evidence remained. Morales requested holding the Rivergate dock area for another 48 hours to monitor tides and currents. If anything floated, they would detect it in time. For the next 2 days, the river patrol sweep still yielded no results. No body, no vehicle, no personal items. The area around the Texaco station was checked again, but showed nothing unusual. All possible signs had been erased by weather and time. At the end of the 5th day, Morales completed his second report to superiors. He wrote, "No new evidence collected." Sole witness is a port worker, indirect testimony, unconfirmed. Victim or vehicle, not located. Case remains missing, under undetermined circumstances. He then temporarily closed the file, leaving the red-pinned map on his desk. The afternoon rain fell again, the rising river water covering the concrete bank where the car was said to have appeared. The city sank into new layers of fog, and Annie Lawson's disappearance still had no promising trace to advance. 3 days after the official search was temporarily halted, a dock worker named Harold Dunn called the Portland Police Department. He reported that, while inspecting mooring area 4 at the Rivergate dock, he saw the rear of a car protruding from the water, wedged between 2 drifting logs. The morning tide was low, and faint sunlight reflecting on the river revealed the glossy black paint beneath the mud. The information was immediately forwarded to Inspector Frank Morales. He rushed to the scene with 2 officers and the salvage team. The area was temporarily cordoned off, and workers and cargo ships were directed to another mooring zone. Upon arrival, Morales confirmed the car's rear was indeed that of an old Ford Sedan, matching the description from the missing person report. Part of the body was submerged in murky water, with thick mud caked around the rear wheels. Cables were attached to the chassis, and the car was slowly pulled ashore under his supervision. As the water drained, the technical team examined the vehicle's exterior. The license plate was nearly obscured by mud, but after cleaning, the numbers matched exactly the vehicle registered to Margaret Lawson. The driver's side door was locked, the front windshield partially shattered, and the rear door glass cracked diagonally. Morales leaned in, peering through the broken window, and noticed a long, dark brownish-red streak on the front seat. He ordered photos of the scene and immediate sealing of the vehicle before transport. The car was then taken to the police department's evidence lot. There, a detailed forensic examination was conducted under the cold white lights of the warehouse. When the doors were pried open, the smell of damp river water and rusted metal filled the room. The interior was half filled with mud and debris. Morales and the forensic staff began documenting every detail. The windshield cracked from the inside, the gear shift broken, the steering wheel with small dents resembling heavy impact. On the passenger seat, they found a white handkerchief caked in mud, with the edges embroidered, AA, in blue thread. Morales used tweezers to place it in a labeled nylon evidence bag. In the glove compartment, there was no wallet or identification, only a few coins mixed in the mud, and an old parking ticket. The glove box was empty, the radio broken, wires tangled. Everything was photographed and recorded in the evidence log. The driver's seat had multiple dark brown stains, spreading from the backrest to the seat cushion. The forensic technician took samples with cotton swabs, preliminarily identifying dried blood. The driver's side door showed scrape marks, possibly from a hard object dragged forcefully. Paint near the door was chipped, exposing dull metal. Outside the car, Morales found a small dent in the front bumper, as if the vehicle had struck something heavy before sliding down the embankment. He ordered measurements of the ground slope and panoramic photos of the dock area where the car was recovered. The distance from the shore to the recovery point was about 12 meters, indicating the car could not have drifted on its own, but was pushed or driven down. Once all samples were collected, Morales had the chassis number cleaned for verification. The serial matched the Lawson family registration, confirming it was the victim's car. The preliminary report stated, personal vehicle belonging to missing person Annie Lawson, recovered at Rivergate dock, damage suspected from external impact, biological fluid traces on seats and steering wheel. He signed it, ordered the vehicle sealed, and restricted access to the forensic team only. While the technical team cleared the scene, Morales stood outside the warehouse, looking along the river. The water remained murky and slow, carrying industrial debris from upstream. He knew this discovery could change the entire nature of the case. A locked car, broken glass, bloodstains, and a missing wallet could not be a simple accident. That same afternoon, he sent an urgent report to superiors requesting the file be reclassified from missing under unclear circumstances to criminal investigation suspected homicide. As night fell, Morales returned to the Rivergate dock for a final check. Fresh salvage vehicle tire tracks covered the old mud, but he could still see deep skid marks on the ground leading straight to the water's edge, parallel to where the Ford was found. These marks proved the car moved under control, not swept away. Wind from the river carried a chill, mixing the smells of gasoline, oil, and rust into the dock's signature scent. Morales wrote a few final lines in his notebook, marking November 2, 1945, the day Annie Lawson's car was recovered. He then left the scene, certain the case was no longer just a simple disappearance. After the Ford Sedan was recovered and sealed, the full forensic examination was conducted at the Portland Police Department's evidence warehouse. Inspector Frank Morales was present from early morning, joined by 2 forensic technicians and a scene photographer. The goal was to determine the vehicle's condition, analyze traces, and catalog samples collected inside. The work area was lit by halogen lamps, and the entire vehicle surface was covered with thin nylon to prevent contamination. The unsealing log recorded the time and signatures of Morales and the lead technician. First, the forensic technician examined blood traces on the driver's seat. Cotton swabs were applied to the dark brown streak running from the backrest to the cushion. The Kastle-Meyer test yielded a positive reaction for hemoglobin, confirming human blood. 3 samples were taken from different spots, sequentially numbered and sealed in test tubes. The department's internal lab identified the blood type as O+, matching the medical record provided by Annie Lawson's mother. This was noted in the preliminary report. Blood in vehicle type O+, highly likely victims. Morales marked it with a red star, considering it the first direct evidence of violence inside the car. Next, the team examined the exterior. Along the driver's side door, 4 long, deep scratches ran downward, with paint chipped to expose gray metal. The scratches were parallel, evenly spaced, indicating a hard-tipped object, possibly fingernails or a small metal tool. A technician measured them, recording an average length of 8 to 11 centimeters, with close-up photos of each. At the lower door corner was a light drag mark, suggesting the door was forcibly pulled open or closed. Morales closely inspected the handle area and found a faint crescent-shaped dent, possibly a fingerprint from a struggle. The entire door was dusted with aluminum powder for fingerprints. 3 faint prints were detected, not clear enough for comparison, but photographed and archived. The passenger side floor showed dried mud mixed with fine sand, different from the riverbank mud. Under magnification, Morales saw a partial shoe print in the dust. The rubber sole was worn, with a zigzag pattern, size approximately 11, consistent with men's shoes. A ruler was placed beside it, and photos were taken from 3 angles for accuracy. The technician separated the dried mud from the floor, placing it in evidence bag 12A. This was the only evidence potentially linking to a second person. Morales ordered copies of the photos, 1 attached to the main file, 1 kept in the technical unit. He noted briefly, male shoe print, large size in front passenger area. Does not match victim's shoes. Once documentation was complete, the car was lifted to inspect the undercarriage. No severe collision damage beyond the small front bumper dent. From beneath the frame, Morales noticed a scrape running along the support bar, parallel to the ground. According to the technician, the car may have been driven down the riverbank rather than drifting freely. These points were marked and technically photographed. They then returned to the cabin for further trace searches. Under the driver's seat, Morales found a small fabric scrap, possibly from a sleeve or pocket tear, collected as sample 15C. By noon, work paused for summarization. A preliminary evidence table was drafted. Asterisk evidence 1, blood type O+, matching victim. Asterisk evidence 2, male shoe print size 11, not matching victim shoes. Asterisk evidence 3, scratches and drag marks on driver's door, signs of struggle. Asterisk evidence 4, white handkerchief embroidered A, victim's property. Asterisk evidence 5, front bumper dent and chassis skid marks. Suspected vehicle pushed into river. After reviewing, Morales signed for confirmation and sent the report to the chief's office. Copies were filed under Digital Case 45103L, and all evidence was sealed in specialized bags, signed and stamped by 3 parties: Morales, lead technician, and forensic representative. Blood, fabric, and mud samples with the shoe print were sent that afternoon to the Oregon State Forensic Lab in Salem for advanced analysis. Before leaving the warehouse, Morales reviewed all photos again. He closely examined the image of the door scratches, where 3 parallel marks resembled clawing fingers. Instinctively, he believed the victim tried to open the door to escape. Under the white lights, the chipped paint, looked like evidence of a brief but violent struggle. In a memo attached to the report, he wrote concisely, "High likelihood victim attacked while seated in car. Blood, scratches, and shoe print prove second person's presence. Case nature confirmed criminal." By the end of the day, the examination area was cleared, the car covered with tarp and resealed pending state lab results. Morales closed his notebook, looked at case number 45103L, written on the sealed envelope, and carefully folded it. The case had moved beyond a simple disappearance, and the day's evidence laid the foundation for an official criminal investigation. While awaiting preliminary results from the state forensic lab, Inspector Frank Morales expanded the investigation toward witnesses. In Attendant Edward Grant's report from the Texaco gas station, one detail stood out. The man Annie spoke to before leaving was called Ray. Grant's description noted, approximately 6 feet tall, black hair, dark skin, southern accent, wearing a military coat. Morales summoned him to headquarters for a second statement, asking for as much detail as possible. Under the white lights of the interrogation room, Grant tried to recall, "I think his name was Ray, maybe Raymond. He'd stopped at the station a couple times, said he was recently discharged and looking for work at the port." Miss Lawson seemed to recognize him, but I didn't hear much of their conversation. Morales meticulously recorded every word and requested the administrative unit to cross-check recently returned veterans in the Portland area. Records from the Veterans Office, received that afternoon, showed 5 Raymonds living around St. John's, only one matching the description. Full name, Raymond Yazid, 27 years old, former Army, discharged early 1945. Records noted he was born in Alabama, moved to Oregon for ship repair factory work, currently renting a room at the Lombard Inn. Morales dug deeper and found Yazid was arrested in Spokane in 1943 for a bar assault but released after the witness withdrew the complaint. This history of violence, combined with his presence at the same location and time as the victim, created a significant lead. The next morning, Morales and another officer went to the Lombard Inn on Lombard Street. It was an old 2-story wooden building with peeling paint, typically renting short-term rooms to dock workers and day laborers. The landlady, Mrs. Lillian Moore, confirmed Raymond Yazid had rented a second-floor room for about 2 months. She said he came and went irregularly, kept to himself, but sometimes came back smelling of alcohol. When asked about the night Annie disappeared, she couldn't recall clearly, only saying he came back very late, or maybe early the next morning. Morales requested to inspect the room. Inside the small space, the bed was unmade, with a few newspapers and Camel cigarette wrappers on the table, the same brand found in the victim's car. He immediately noted it and collected 2 wrappers for fingerprint analysis. In the closet, a military coat was slightly damp on the right sleeve, with old gray mud stains. A mud sample was taken and sealed in evidence bag 21B. Leaving the boarding house, Morales instructed Mrs. Moore to say nothing about the visit and assigned surveillance to Yazid. That afternoon, the surveillance team reported the suspect at a cafe near the St. John's Bridge, sitting alone, not interacting. He walked heavily, often keeping his right hand in his coat pocket, seemingly in pain. By around 8 p.m., Yazid returned to his room and locked the door from inside. This was logged in the surveillance report. Morales also sent the mud and cigarette samples to the department's forensic lab for comparison with those from the Ford. 2 days later, preliminary comparison results confirmed the mud on Yazid's coat had similar mineral properties to the Rivergate dock mud, primarily clay mixed with oil and fine sand, rare elsewhere in Portland. This match was not conclusive, but strengthened the theory that Yazid was at the recovery site. Morales had Edward Grant come in for photo identification. From 6 veteran photos, Grant pointed to Yazid and said firmly, "That's him. That's Ray." The identification was signed before 2 witnesses. At the same time, Morales gathered more statements around the gas station. A woman named Helen Ward, living in the apartment across the street, said that on the night Annie disappeared, she heard a car stop and two people talking briefly before driving off. She didn't see faces clearly, but remembered a man in a long coat, low voice, not from the neighborhood. This matched Grant's description and Yazid's profile. Morales compiled all documents into a summary table. By the weekend, the preliminary suspect file was complete. Raymond Yazid, 27, veteran, history of violence, present at Texaco station at the time of disappearance. Residing near the dock where the car was found, mud sample in room matching scene. Identified by gas station attendant and a civilian witness. Morales signed the report and submitted it to the chief's office, requesting approval for an official summons. That evening, he sat alone in his office, reviewing photos of the Ford and the lined-up evidence. Blood, shoe print, scratches, embroidered handkerchief. All told the same story. Someone was in the car with Annie Lawson in her final moments. Now, the name Raymond Yazid sat at the center of every fact. On the last page of his notebook, Morales wrote briefly, "Primary suspect, Raymond Yazid. Urgent interrogation needed." With that note, the case moved to the next phase, direct confrontation with the man believed to be the last person to see Annie alive. On the morning of November 9, 1945, after receiving approval from the chief's office, Inspector Frank Morales and two officers went to the Lombard Inn to bring Raymond Yazid in for questioning. He did not resist, appearing calm, wearing his old military coat, hair disheveled, with a faint smell of alcohol. When asked the reason, Morales said briefly that police needed to clarify details related to a missing girl in St. John's. Yazid was taken to the second-floor interrogation room, containing only a metal table, 2 chairs, and a large reel-to-reel recorder. The interrogation began at 9 a.m. Morales started with administrative questions: name, age, occupation, residence. Yazid answered clearly, voice steady. When asked if he knew a girl named Annie Lawson, he paused briefly, then said, "I met her at the gas station. She asked for directions. I told her to go straight over the bridge, then turn left. That's it." Morales noted it and asked if they knew each other before. Yazid shook his head, saying it was a chance encounter, never spoken otherwise. Morales shifted to that evening. Where was he after leaving the station? Yazid said. After buying cigarettes, he walked back to the boarding house, arriving around 10. When asked who could confirm, he said no one, as everyone was asleep. This prompted Morales to note in the margin, weak alibi, no confirming witness. He continued asking about the military coat and shoes. Yazid said his shoes were worn at the sole, often muddy from dock work. Morales showed photos of the shoe print found in the car, asking if he recognized the sole pattern. He glanced and replied, "Shoes like that are sold everywhere." As the interrogation neared an hour, Morales noticed Yazid's right hand, a fresh scratch, long, with dried blood along the edges, running from the thumb joint to the wrist. He asked about it. Yazid immediately said, "Caught it on a nail while fixing a bicycle." Morales asked him to describe the place and time. He said a few days ago but couldn't recall the exact day. The wound looked fresh, inconsistent with the explanation. Morales signaled the technician to note details and photograph the hand. He then presented evidence of the victim's Ford found at Rivergate dock, with blood and scratches. Upon hearing this, Yazid fell silent, eyes flickering slightly, then softly said, "I don't know anything about that. I just ran into her by chance." Morales kept his voice calm, saying the police would need to take his blood sample to rule out involvement, a standard procedure. Yazid agreed, perhaps believing he couldn't be charged on suspicion alone. The blood was drawn in the department's medical room and sent immediately to the internal lab. While awaiting results, Morales continued questioning, asking about his military service, current job, and personal relationships. Yazid answered disjointedly, sometimes avoiding eye contact. When Morales asked if he had ever been arrested or involved in fights before, he shrugged. "I was on the battlefield. Who hasn't gotten into trouble a couple times?" That response heightened Morales's vigilance. By late afternoon, the preliminary test results arrived. The report confirmed Yazid's blood was type O+, matching the blood found in the victim's car. Morales read the results, placed them on the table, and looked directly at the suspect. He asked, "Did you know Miss Lawson was O+?" Yazid replied, "No," in a low voice. Morales said, "Your blood is the same type. Her car has O+ blood, and you were the last person seen with her. How do you explain that?" He sighed, gave a faint smile. "Millions of people have that blood type. You want to charge me just because it matches?" Morales didn't respond, only noting in his book, "Blood type match, insufficient for individual identification." The interrogation ended around 6 p.m. Morales knew there wasn't enough legal basis for detention. No witnesses saw the crime, no weapon, and forensic technology at the time couldn't identify DNA from blood. He consulted the prosecutor, who agreed they had to release him due to insufficient circumstantial evidence. Morales signed the termination record and instructed the investigation unit to continue monitoring Yazid. As he was released and walked out of headquarters, Morales stood in the hallway watching. Yazid glanced back briefly, eyes cold, then disappeared down the fog-covered road toward the St. John's Bridge. In the internal report submitted that day, Morales wrote, *suspect, Raymond Yazid, male, 27, veteran, residing at Lombard Inn. *reason for interrogation. Last person seen with victim, status, denies involvement, provides unverified alibi. Observations, fresh scratch on right hand, blood type O+, matches sample in victim's vehicle. Preliminary conclusion, insufficient evidence to prosecute. Continue surveillance and gather more data. Closing the file, Morales leaned back in his chair, feeling the familiar deadlock of cases lacking physical evidence. Every sign pointed to one person, but no detail was strong enough to hold him. In the quiet room, the wall clock ticked dryly. Outside, fog began thickening over St. John's, and the investigation fell into a heavy silence. Morales knew would linger. After Raymond Yazid was released, the case temporarily quieted, but Inspector Frank Morales refused to close the file. He understood that despite lacking charging evidence, all collected data pointed in one directly. To continue, he convened the Lawson case team and planned a full re-evaluation of the scene and statements. The meeting took place in the main investigation room, where the large red-pinned map still hung on the wall. Morales used a pointer to trace the main route from the diner where Annie worked, through the Texaco station, to the boarding house. He marked 3 key points: starting point, gas stop, and vehicle recovery location. From there, 3 hypotheses were proposed. First hypothesis, a homicide, the victim attacked in the car, body disposed in the river. Supporting factors, O+ blood matching victim, door scratches, large male shoe print in passenger area, externally locked doors, and front bumper skid, indicating the car was pushed into the water. Morales believed, if intentional, the perpetrator likely had prior acquaintance with the victim, or at least approached her in a familiar setting. He added that the motive could be robbery or assault resisted leading to murder. Second hypothesis. The victim met with an accident and fell into the river. In this scenario, Annie may have turned wrong or panicked, causing the car to plunge off the dock. However, Morales quickly dismissed most of this possibility. Tire skid marks showed straight movement, no abrupt braking, and the front dent and recovery position indicated deliberate pushing or driving. Additionally, externally locked doors contradicted emergency behavior in an accident. Third hypothesis. The victim left voluntarily, staging disappearance. Some younger officers raised this due to no body found, but Morales deemed it baseless. All belongings, wages, identification remained in the boarding house. The car was abandoned in abnormal condition. No signs of financial preparation or prior contact for leaving. He underlined on the board, voluntary departure probability, near 0. After presenting the 3 hypotheses, Morales ordered a reconstruction of Annie Lawson's route on the night of disappearance. A detailed topographic map was expanded, including side roads to the river, By his calculation, Texaco to boarding house took about 10 minutes straight, but Texaco to Rivergate dock, where the car was found, extended in the opposite direction over 2 miles. Morales noted the Ford's presence there was anomalous and could only occur if the victim was forced to turn or tricked into another direction. He sent 2 officers, Wilson and Carter, to drive the route at night to recheck lighting, landmarks, and visibility. Results showed the turn to the dock area was very dark, no warning signs, quite isolated, easily misled if someone gave deliberate directions. Combined with the gas station attendant's statement about the southern-accented man in military coat, Morales concluded Annie may have been lured off her familiar route. The internal report was completed that week. Morales detailed factors reinforcing the homicide direction. 1. Physical evidence indicates violence in the vehicle. 2. Victim's car found locked, wallet and papers missing, signs of concealment. 3. Recovery location not on home route, but in remote industrial area, ideal for disposal. 4. Last witness confirms a man spoke with victim just before disappearance. Morales presented this summary in a meeting with superiors. He emphasized focusing on assault and disposal over accident. When asked about accomplices, he replied no clear evidence yet, but the perpetrator likely acted alone, given the short time between leaving the station and the car's last sighting at the dock. In the final report to the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office, Morales concluded, current factors align with intentional homicide. Vehicle disposal indicates intent to erase traces. Need continued physical evidence and witnesses to establish criminal liability. He requested maintain surveillance on Raymond Yazid and verification of his departure time from the station on the incident night. That evening, Morales sat in his office, staring at the map with the red-pinned line ending at the Rivergate dock edge. All analysis led to one conclusion: the victim had no chance to leave that area by her own will. He wrote the final line in that day's memo: Hypothesis 1. Homicide. Body disposed. Prioritized. After unifying the main investigation direction, Inspector Frank Morales ordered a second sweep operation around Rivergate. The goal was to verify the hypothesis that the victim was murdered and disposed at the river dock. The search was larger scale, mobilizing the River Patrol dive team and dock personnel. From early morning, the Ford recovery area was cordoned with tape. Cargo ships halted within a 200-meter radius. Winter river water was murky with oil and silt, near zero underwater visibility, yet Morales demanded thorough checks of every shore segment and riverbed around the vehicle site. The 6-person dive team, split into 2 groups, started from the western shore embankment with the access slope. Each carried positioning lines, waterproof lights, and recovery nets. On shore, Morales and his assistant monitored buoy signals. Every surfacing, he directly questioned and noted details. The first morning yielded only rotten wood and rust. By afternoon, when a diver retrieved a small algae-covered object from about 4 meters deep, the team paid real attention. It was a woman's low-heel shoe, leather straps decayed. Morales ordered mud cleaned, revealing dark brown leather and a broken ankle buckle. Compared to Mrs. Lawson's description, it matched Annie's work shoes perfectly. The evidence was separately wrapped, labeled 26A, and sent to technical. Continuing, on the second day the dive team found a fabric piece tangled in old riverbed timber, about 15 square centimeters. Upon surfacing, Morales saw dark gray wool, matching the victim's coat material. A pulled thread created a straight tier. Technicians visually compared to family-provided victim photos, matching color and weave. The sample was sealed as 27B. Morales stood silently viewing the new evidence, noting in his book, Probability Victim Attacked at Dock High. On the third day, weather worsened. Upstream wind created small waves, water murky and freezing. The dive team continued expanding circles toward the old cargo pier. Near afternoon's end, a diver signaled a small metal object in the mud. Surfaced, it was a short brass cartridge casing, lightly rusted but with base marking, 3202. Morales carefully lifted it with steel tweezers, examining the rim. No heavy impact marks, indicating close-range discharge. He photographed it immediately, placed in separate evidence bag 28C, signed, and sent to forensics for ballistics. The three items, shoe, fabric, casing, were the most significant finds since the case began. That evening, Morales convened the full team to summarize. He pinned new scene photos to the map, marking 3 close discovery points, forming a small triangle at the dock edge. In his assessment, this could be the attack area. Both shoe and fabric in the same zone suggested items fell during struggle, not carried by current. The .32 casing further supported a handgun's use. Morales ordered technicians to measure mud depth at the casing site, averaging 50 centimeters, meaning the object wasn't deeply buried, likely dropped days before vehicle recovery. He compared tide data and noted water levels at Annie's disappearance matched when the casing could have been covered. In the preliminary report to department leadership, Morales wrote, "Rivergate riverbed samples include one woman's shoe, wool fabric piece, and .32 casing. Characteristics match victim Lawson and indicate on-site struggle. No evidence of traffic accident or natural drift. Recommend continued shore and riverbed sweep within 200-meter radius." On the 4th day, the department's geology unit assisted surveying the western shore soil. Using probes and compaction meters, they detected an area near the old pier with unusual surface structure, recently filled. Morales inspected directly. Digging the top layer revealed rotten wood and industrial waste, but underlying soil was darker, looser, less compacted. Though nothing further found, the difference was noted. Morales concluded possible on-site burial, but specialized equipment needed for verification. The final sweep summary was 7 pages, describing the full process, positions, coordinates, and results. In the evaluation, Morales clearly wrote, based on physical evidence and terrain, high likelihood victim attacked and killed at Rivergate dock. Disposal method was victim's own vehicle. No body found, but scene signs indicate deliberate concealment or burial. The report was signed, stamped, and sent directly to the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office by day's end. As Morales left the dock, light rain fell, the river rippled, marker buoys bobbed faintly on the gray water, drifting slowly around the area he believed was the tragedy's starting point. The weeks after the Willamette sweep passed in heavy silence. Every investigation path returned to the same deadlock. No body, no new witnesses, no evidence strong enough to convict. The found items, shoe, fabric, casing, were sent for analysis, but results showed no identifiable perpetrator traces. Fingerprints on the car door too faint for comparison, and blood, though confirmed Annie Lawson's, couldn't link to anyone else with then technology. Ballistics only confirmed .32 auto, too common to trace. Morales read each result, underlining data gaps, then quietly filed them. When he met the district prosecutor to request expanded surveillance on Raymond Yazid, it was denied. The office deemed insufficient basis to monitor a released person without direct evidence. Days later, reports came that Yazid had left Portland, telling the landlady he was looking for work in California. Morales verified at the train station. A ticket clerk confirmed a tall man in a military coat took the evening southbound train. That was the last information on him. After Yazid left the city, the investigation lost focus. Morales tried maintaining the file, but pressure from superiors mounted. Media no longer mentioned Annie Lawson's disappearance. Search participants returned to routine duty. Rivergate dock bustled again with cargo, previous dive marker buoys severed by vessels drifting downstream. Each time crossing the St. John's Bridge, Morales looked down at the murky water and felt something unfinished. He believed the answer lay somewhere under the river silt, but time and circumstances wouldn't allow deeper digging. In early February 1946, after nearly 4 months without progress, the Portland Police Department held an internal meeting to review open cases. The long list included thefts, assaults, and several unsolved murders. The Lawson case was marked gray, pending closure. When his turn came, Morales briefly presented the investigation process, listing evidence, witnesses, and analysis results. He admitted no new leads to expand. After his presentation, the investigation chief decided to suspend the case, reconsidering reactivation upon new evidence. The file was officially closed on February 28, 1946. That afternoon, Morales alone packed the final documents. He arranged each evidence bag into a wooden box: the AL embroidered handkerchief, gray fabric piece, leather shoe, cartridge casing, photos of the car door and shoe print, each bag labeled and signed by him. When reaching the handkerchief, Morales paused longer. Though cleaned and dried in storage, the white cloth still held a yellowish tint from river water. The blue embroidered initials stood clear and neat, a small detail but one he felt was the case's most significant evidence. He couldn't explain why, only that it carried the victim's personal mark more than anything else. Morales took a pencil and wrote on the sealed envelope's back, "Retain may be needed in future." He then placed the bag in the box, labeled Case 45103L, Annie Lawson, Evidence, signed, and applied wax seal. The next day, the evidence box along with the entire file was transferred to the Portland Police Department's storage vault, placed on the third shelf, row D. Morales signed the handover record to the archivist and left the room, still holding his personal notebook. In it, he wrote one final line before closing it: "Perpetrator unidentified, body not recovered, case suspended. Handkerchief may be key in the future." That line was later preserved verbatim in the Portland Police Department's official file, a small reminder of an inspector's belief in never fully giving up. As he stepped out of headquarters into the light afternoon rain, the city was shrouded in thin fog. The St. John's Bridge lights reflected on the rippling river. Morales paused for a few seconds before getting into his car, looking toward the distant hazy Rivergate dock. He knew Annie Lawson's case would soon be forgotten among hundreds of others, but in his mind, the image of the AL embroidered handkerchief lingered, a silent witness to something yet untold. The case had reached a deadlock, and with what remained, no one knew when justice might resume. After the Annie Lawson case was officially categorized as suspended, her name gradually vanished from Portland Police Department internal meetings. The year 1946 passed, then 1947, with no reports or calls providing new information. The file was sealed in storage, alongside hundreds of others, neatly stacked on dusty metal shelves. Inspector Morales's note, "Handkerchief may be key in the future," lay quietly on the final page, unread. Portland was then entering post-war reconstruction. The city expanded southward, thousands of veterans returned to rebuild lives, and riverside industrial zones gradually revived. New people, cargo ships, and rising constructions made the disappearance of a young woman a decade earlier a distant story few mentioned. Morales continued working in investigations for over a decade. Known for meticulousness, reticence, and strict file organization, he retired in 1958 and moved to suburban Beaverton. In his small home, a locked old wooden cabinet held personal copies of unsolved cases, including the Lawson file. He once told a young colleague, "No case truly ends if the evidence remains." 3 years later, in 1961, Morales died of heart disease. His family returned all documents to the police department. An inventory confirmed the Lawson file and evidence were intact, never reopened. In the 1960s, Portland changed rapidly. Willamette Riverside docks were renovated, Rivergate redeveloped into a modern container port. Riverbank land was filled, old embankments erased. The site where Annie's Ford was found became a wide concrete lot topped with large warehouses. New topographic maps omitted all traces of the old scene from city boundaries. No one in the new police generation knew of the black and white photos documenting the 1945 case. In the 1970s, with industrial growth, the Portland police apparatus modernized. Old files were reclassified. Most pre-1950 unsolved cases were moved to the deepest storage in the old Burnside Administrative Building. There, File 45103L sat in Drawer 4, Row D, wrapped in a hard envelope containing wax-sealed evidence bags. The 1975 periodic inspection noted satisfactory preservation, humidity stable, seals intact. Technicians briefly wrote, "Not opened, no reprocessing required." In the 1980s, new investigative technologies emerged, but no one considered reviewing old disappearances. The city was busy with current cases, and past files were seen as archival heritage rather than leads. At Rivergate, warehouses, factories, and modern container docks filled every empty space once part of the scene. The river was dredged, old silt removed, leaving no trace of the 1945 search. Anyone passing would see only a harsh, noisy industrial zone, evoking no memory of a case that once shook the city. Entering the 1990s, the Portland Police Department's file storage transitioned to electronic systems. Old files were recoded, thousands of cases digitized for easy retrieval. The Lawson file retained its old designation, but gained a new electronic tracking code. Morales's note remained, the handwritten line faded but legible. A young archivist, named Bill Rogers, once stumbled upon it, shaking his head with a smile, who today would look for clues in a handkerchief from half a century ago. The file was then returned to its place. By 2002, the Annie Lawson case was 57 years old. In the department's catalog, it was a dry line. Missing person, closed 1946. No victim relatives remained in Portland. The old St. John's boarding house demolished for new apartments. All original investigators had retired or passed away. Only the evidence, old sealed cloth bags, including the AL embroidered handkerchief, remained in basement storage, preserved by stable temperature and humidity. Over the years, the wax seals hardened, adhering tightly to the envelopes, preserving Frank Morales's signature. In a city nearly transformed, the Lawson case became a forgotten name. No one spoke of the nursing student who vanished on a rainy 1945 night, nor remembered the inspector who persistently pursued it. But among thousands of dormant files under the dim storage lights, the handwritten handkerchief, maybe key in the future, remained a message spanning nearly 6 decades, awaiting someone to read it and wonder if Morales was right. In early 2003, the Portland Police Department launched the Cold Case Review Program, reviewing unsolved 20th century cases. Part of Oregon's investigative reform plan, it leveraged DNA analysis advances to re-examine decades-stalled cases. A small team of 6 detectives and 2 technicians was formed to review over 300 old files. Assigned to 1940s cases was Detective Nora Lee, 35, specializing in forensic investigation and scene reconstruction. She was part of the new police generation, meticulous, reserved, data-driven, yet with special respect for predecessors. In the initial review days, Nora worked in the old basement archive of Central Police Headquarters. High shelves nearly touched the ceiling, dusty, numbered by year. Reaching 1949, she found a small wooden box, label faded but legible, Case 45103L, Annie Lawson. Beside the number, a hardened wax seal bore F. Morales. Nora carefully placed the box on the table, logging it as an unsolved homicide review. Opening the lid revealed yellowed paper files and 4 separately wrapped evidence bags. Shoe, gray fabric, .32 casing, and the white AL embroidered handkerchief. Nora examined each old document. Inspector Morales's report was more detailed than expected. Scene diagrams, evidence locations, witness statements, even Rivergate dock current maps. She was impressed by the neat, steady ink handwriting, reflecting careful investigation in a pre-technology era. At the report's end, the handwritten handkerchief, maybe key in the future, made her pause. She smiled faintly. Rare for a past-era officer to leave such a confident note. She decided to start with that evidence. Placing the sealed handkerchief bag under fluorescent light, Nora closely observed, fabric intact, blue edge stitching clear. She called the project lead, requesting permission for DNA sampling. As evidence over half a century old, unsealing required official prosecutor approval. Authorization was signed 2 days later, with full sampling filmed and logged. On February 24, 2003, under two forensic staff supervision, the seal was broken. Nora, gloved, gently cut a small corner of the handkerchief, placing it in a sterile tube. The sample was coded E47B and prepared for the Oregon State Police DNA lab in Salem. Before shipping, Nora completed the file reopening record, Case 45103L, Annie Lawson. Unsolved homicide from 1945. Evidence intact, suitable for analysis. DNA testing required on remaining biological sample. She signed and noted the file reactivation time. From that moment, the Lawson case officially left closed status and entered the department's reinvestigation list. While awaiting results, Nora researched her predecessor. Personnel files showed Inspector Frank Morales served from 1938 to 1958, renowned for meticulousness and optimal evidence preservation. His technical notes explained the handkerchief's condition after nearly 60 years. Keep dry, avoid moisture, no direct light exposure. That care prevented degradation. Nora also accessed Portland PD's new electronic database, searching Annie Lawson. Beyond the disappearance summary, no further information. No reopened notes, no reports from 1946 onward. She extracted all original data and re-entered it in current standards for tracking. Beside Morales's name, she added, "Review by Detective Nora Lee, 2003. One late afternoon, as fading daylight filtered through the small archive window, Nora stood gazing at the dusty file shelves. She realized most would likely never be read again. But the Lawson case was different. Evidence remained, and an old inspector's message reminded her something was unfinished. On February 28, the E47B DNA sample box was transported by specialized vehicle to the Salem lab. Accompanying were copies of the original file, scene photos, evidence logs, and 1945 detailed description. On the outer envelope, Nora handwritten, "Reopened under Cold Case Review Project. DNA priority." She knew analyzing a nearly 60-year-old biological sample was rare, but the state lab's new technology could extract DNA even from oxidized samples. That evening, after handover procedures, Nora closed the nearly 500-page file. On the cover, below the old Case 45103L, Annie Lawson, she added a new blue ink line. Reopened February 2003, DNA analysis pending. Office lights reflected on the old cover, highlighting the two initials on the attached handkerchief photo. Like the inspector who believed decades earlier, Nora sensed every story eventually returns to its start, and the 1945 Portland disappearance had just entered a new chapter. The Oregon State Police DNA lab in Salem took nearly 3 weeks to complete analysis of the Lawson file handkerchief sample, one of the oldest biological samples tested in the Cold Case Review Program. Technicians worked meticulously to avoid destroying remaining molecular structure. They began by lightly washing the cut fabric, separating oxidized mud and proteins, then centrifuging for extraction. The initial test yielded usable DNA signals, though weak. After multiple filtrations and PCR amplification, 2 distinct DNA sequences were recorded, one female, matching the victim's DNA profile from Margaret Lawson's 1945 hospital blood sample, the second male, identity unknown. On March 25, 2003, the preliminary report was sent to the Portland PD project team. Upon receiving it, Detective Nora Lee immediately traveled to Salem for a direct briefing from the lead technician. On the large screen, she saw 2 overlapping gene graphs, female markers stable, male with sufficient 13 genetic loci for national CODIS database comparison. "This sample is more intact than we expected," the technician said. "Despite over half a century, the chain structure is clear. That means someone handled the handkerchief very close to the incident." Nora took notes and requested technical copies for the department's lab. On March 29, the male DNA was entered into CODIS, storing hundreds of thousands of criminal biological profiles nationwide. Old cases rarely matched, but after 2 days, the system returned a full match with profile WA 16,214. Raymond Yazid, born 1918, residing in Spokane, Washington. Accompanying data showed his DNA was entered in 1998 after an assault arrest, but released for health reasons. Notes stated, status alive, receiving veteran benefits. When Yazid's name appeared, Nora paused several seconds. It was identical to the man in Inspector Morales's report nearly 60 years earlier, the suspect interrogated but released for lack of evidence. The next day, Nora reported the DNA match to Portland police leadership. An emergency meeting was held with Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office and Oregon State investigation representatives. Data was re-verified by cross-method, handkerchief DNA, Yazid's Washington profile, and 1945 blood type records, all matched biologically, confirming high probability of the same individual. The official report concluded, male biological sample from evidence E47B matches DNA of Raymond Yazid, born 1918. Error probability, less than 1 in 10 billion. Nora and the team immediately opened identity verification files. Administrative data showed Yazid, now 85, lived alone in a small wooden house in suburban Spokane. Local hospital records noted short admissions for shoulder injury, no cohabiting relatives. Still a U.S. citizen, receiving Army veteran benefits. Despite age, he hadn't left Washington in 10 years. This information was sent to Spokane PD for address confirmation. Simultaneously, Nora requested a temporary freeze on Yazid's personal records to prevent asset movement or state departure. Parallel to identity checks, Nora reviewed all old suspect documents. She found the 1945 interrogation transcript, detailed scratched hand description, O+ blood type, and denial statements. Morales's lines read like predictions validated by New Century Science. She copied the entire file and added her comment, biological evidence confirms Raymond Yazid's presence in victim's vehicle at incident time. Intentional homicide hypothesis strengthened. On April 5, the team officially opened reinvestigation file 45103L. Tasks were clearly divided. Nora oversaw forensics and evidence, another detective coordinated with Spokane PD for data collection, and the technical team reviewed archived footage and Rivergate documents. The entire file was digitized and entered into the new system. Raymond Yazid was relisted as an open suspect, status alive, under verification. In the report to the Cold Case Review Director, Nora wrote, E47B. Evidence DNA analysis confirms male biological sample, Keolis comparison, fully matches Raymond Yazid, 85, Spokane, Washington. Data reinforces original 45103L homicide hypothesis. Recommend full reinvestigation, including identity verification, interviews, and Rivergate scene resurvey. Signing the report, Nora looked at case 45103L, Annie Lawson, printed on the cover. 60 years later, the small embroidered initials handkerchief accomplished what the previous investigation generation couldn't, pointing to a name, a real person. On April 8, 2003, Portland PD's electronic storage updated the Lawson case status, reopened. DNA match confirmed. Suspect identified, Raymond Yazid. That evening, Nora returned to her office, sitting before a whiteboard filled with new notes. Spokane, Washington. Identity investigation verification warrant. 1945 documents. Cross-reference. She opened her notebook, writing the first line of the new phase. Next step, verify subject and prepare pursuit file. On the desk, the handkerchief AL photo remained neatly placed, a symbol of justice's persistence across 2 centuries. After the DNA results confirmed the match between the evidence and Raymond Yazid, Detective Nora Lee and the Cold Case Review team pursued the next step, locating where Annie Lawson's body might be buried. 60 years had passed, and the Rivergate area today was entirely different from the 1945 original map. Warehouses, container yards, and new roads had replaced the old dock entirely. However, Inspector Frank Morales's original file still contained a detailed hand-drawn map marking the Ford recovery site, shoe and fabric piece. Though yellowed and edge-torn, the map clearly noted relative coordinates based on river flow and distance to the St. John's Bridge. Nora cross-referenced it with current urban planning documents, overlaying the two on a computer. The results showed the former riverbank edge lay beneath land, now owned by the old Rivergate Depot military supply warehouse, a 1960s factory complex now abandoned. On April 14, 2003, the investigation team officially surveyed the site. The surface was cracked concrete, interspersed with weeds growing through crevices. Cross-referencing the map, Nora identified a roughly 40-square-meter area on the western edge, once muddy ground, where Morales suspected object burial. She contacted city authorities for an excavation permit, stating the purpose for a 1945 homicide investigation. The permit was approved after 4 days, and on the morning of April 19, a forensic specialist team with ground-penetrating radar (GPR) arrived at the scene. The radar detected an anomalous circular reflection at about 1.8 meters depth, sized like a burial pit. Soil density there was lower than surrounding areas, matching Morales's 1945 survey notes. Based on this data, Nora decided on limited excavation. The area was cordoned with tape and guarded 24 hours. Digging began early the next morning, witnessed by the prosecutor and Oregon State forensic representatives. Just 30 minutes in, as the second soil layer was removed, a technician's shovel hit something hard. Digging another 50 centimeters revealed human bones, clearly femur and pelvis. Work shifted to meticulous mode. Soil layers brushed away softly, each bone joint position logged. After 4 hours, a full female skeleton emerged, lying on its right side, head facing north, left hand near the chest. The skull had a round 8mm hole in the right temple, clear evidence of a close-range bullet wound. Beside the skeleton was an oxidized brass cartridge casing, .32 auto caliber, matching the type found in the river in 1945. Near the bones were a broken wooden comb and faint fabric scraps, possibly from a wool coat. The entire scene was photographed, measured, and each item numbered. Every bone fragment was separately wrapped and transferred to the Oregon State Forensic Lab for analysis. Nora stood silently at the pit's edge, looking down at the white bones exposed under Portland's gray April light. After nearly 60 years, they had found Annie Lawson's burial site. She asked everyone to pause for a minute to record the moment. 10:42 a.m. on April 20, 2003. The instant the case gained its first verified trace. At the Salem Forensic Lab, identification took 2 weeks. Bones were cleaned, dried, then marrow samples from the femur extracted for nuclear DNA analysis. Comparison results showed complete sequence match with the victim's archived sample and the female DNA from the handkerchief, confirming the remains were Annie Lawson, missing since October 27, 1945. The report also determined cause of death: close-range penetrating bullet wound to the skull, bullet path from right to left, downward, consistent with the victim seated in the car when attacked. No other fractures, indicating instantaneous death, no prolonged struggle. Receiving the results, Nora felt as if hearing Inspector Morales sigh from the past. Everything he predicted was confirmed by scientific evidence. Annie Lawson did not disappear or leave voluntarily, but was murdered and buried in the exact area he indicated. The nearly 80-page report included skull photos, casing, and detailed excavation descriptions. Nora signed the conclusion: cause of death, close-range shooting. Murder weapon, .32 caliber handgun. Estimated time of death, approximately October 1945. On May 3, 2003, the Portland Police Department internally announced the Lawson case now had an identified body. That day, File 45103L was upgraded from missing person to homicide, confirmed. New evidence was numbered 29 to 33, skeleton, casing, wooden comb, fabric piece, and soil sample, all sealed and stored at the State Forensic Lab, awaiting prosecutor orders to complete the charging file. That afternoon, Nora returned to the old scene, where the excavation pit was temporarily covered with green tarp. Beneath the soil lay the remains of the 21-year-old forgotten for nearly 6 decades. Nora pulled from her pocket the only surviving black and white photo of Annie Lawson in nursing uniform from the original file, placing it on a nearby stone. She stood silently for a long while, then quietly said like a promise, "Finally, we found you." In the end-of-day report to the department, Nora wrote briefly, "Body identified as Annie Lawson. Cause of death, close-range shooting. Physical evidence matches 1945, original file. File 45103L, fully reopened." The line was printed and pinned to the front of the over 60-year-old file, marking the moment justice, though late, finally took tangible form. Once forensic results confirmed the Rivergate excavated remains were Annie Lawson, and cause of death was close-range gunshot. An emergency arrest warrant was issued for suspect Raymond Yazid, 85, residing in Spokane, Washington. On the morning of May 6, 2003, the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office signed the official charge of first-degree murder under Oregon law. That day, Portland Police coordinated with Spokane Police and Washington State Investigation Bureau to execute the arrest plan. Detective Nora Lee was designated Oregon's legal representative, directly responsible for evidence seizure and extradition oversight. Yazid's house was on Spokane's northern edge, in a quiet neighborhood of old wooden homes surrounded by tall pines. Civil records showed he lived alone, received veteran benefits, and rarely interacted with neighbors. Local police surveilled for 2 initial days, confirming Yazid remained home with no travel signs. On May 8 at 6 a.m., the 8-person coordinated arrest team acted. 2 patrol cars parked a block away while the main team approached the front door. Under Spokane PD Lieutenant Command, officers knocked, identified themselves, and demanded entry under federal search warrant. After a moment, the wooden door opened, revealing Yazid, white-haired, thin, but eyes still sharply cold. He wore a gray sweater, leaned on a wooden cane, and asked hoarsely the reason. When the officer read the murder arrest warrant for a 1945 Portland incident, Yazid froze briefly, then smirked faintly. "You're over half a century late." He did not resist cuffing, only requesting his coat and medication. Meanwhile, the technical team entered to search under warrant. The small house was tidy, many items bearing old military traces. In a living room wooden cabinet, police found a locked wooden box containing a black Colt .32 automatic pistol, serial number faded, with a box of 8 remaining rounds. The gun was seized per protocol, placed in an evidence bag, sealed on site with 3 officers' signatures. Beside it was a small notebook with scattered pencil notes, mostly dates and work locations. One torn page left only slanted words, Portland 1945. Examining the notebook, Nora felt a chill down her spine. The entire house was searched in 3 hours. Police also found a small box of military mementos, medals, black and white photos of young Yazid by the St. John's Bridge, the disappearance site, all sealed and transferred to Spokane PD evidence. Yazid was escorted to the car, head bowed, face expressionless. Neighbors gathered outside, many shocked as the police convoy departed. No one in the area knew the quiet old man was once a suspect in a nearly 60-year-old murder. That afternoon at Spokane PD headquarters, Detective Nora Lee directly oversaw the initial statement. Yazid sat on a wooden chair before an untouched teacup. Asked about Annie Lawson, he remained silent, eyes distant. Nora placed before him copies of the AL embroidered handkerchief photo and his young self from the original file. "You know this handkerchief?" she asked. Yazid glanced, then turned away. "I don't remember," he said softly. "It was so long ago." He then requested a lawyer. On May 10, 2003, under interstate legal procedure, extradition was approved. Yazid was transported by special vehicle to Portland, accompanied by 2 officers and a medical staff. The nearly 5-hour journey crossed Washington Hills into Oregon. Upon arrival at Portland Police Headquarters, Nora was waiting. Media relatives stood outside, cameras flashing as he stepped down, hands trembling, but eyes glaring defiantly. Police escorted him through the old hallway where a black and white photo of Inspector Frank Morales still hung. Nora glanced at the photo, feeling the case's circle finally closing. The Colt .32 pistol examination was conducted the next day at the Oregon State Forensic Lab. The report showed barrel rifling on the gun, matched the casing found with the victim's body at Rivergate. The bullet was fired from the same barrel type, error under 1%. Though old, spiral wear marks were sufficient for accurate comparison, this evidence was key to confirming Yazid's direct link to the crime. On May 13, the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office issued Indictment 03-112A, charging Raymond Yazid with first-degree murder under Oregon Revised Statutes 163.107, with special circumstances. Intentional murder causing death of Annie Lawson on October 27, 1945, and deliberate concealment of the body. The 42-page charging file included all forensic evidence, DNA results, excavation map, and home search records. As Nora signed suspect handover to Portland Central Detention, she saw him glance back, a faint smile on his lips, then bow his head. The steel door closed, the lock echoing coldly in the long hallway. After over half a century, the man once released for lack of evidence now faced justice. In the end-of-day report, Nora wrote, "Suspect Raymond Yazid arrested in Spokane, Washington. Colt .32 pistol seized matching crime bullet, extradited to Portland. Charging file, first-degree murder." That night, as Portland sank into light rain, Nora sat alone in the file room. On the table, case 45-103L was closed, but this time, beside reopened, was a new red stamp, suspect in custody. 60 years later, the Annie Lawson case finally entered the phase every investigator awaits. The moment justice begins speaking for what the past once silenced. After Raymond Yazid was extradited to Portland and indicted for first-degree murder, Detective Nora Lee and the forensic team began the most meticulous work in the entire process, completing the evidence chain to seal the Annie Lawson case. This task required every analysis result, number, and scene image to be precisely cross-referenced to prove all evidence collected over nearly 60 years linked to one person, suspect Raymond Yazid. On May 15, 2003, the Oregon State Forensic Lab initiated the final comprehensive identification phase. First, DNA cross-matching. 3 samples were compared, female from victim remains, female DNA in the AL embroidered handkerchief, and male DNA from the same item. Results confirmed absolute match between handkerchief female and bone samples, verifying Annie Lawson used the item. The male DNA sequence on the same object continued matching Raymond Yazid's biological sample taken during Central Detention medical exam. Detailed Salem lab analysis set error probability at 1 in 12 trillion, equivalent to absolute proof. The report concluded, 2 biological individuals physically interacted with the object near the victim's time of death. Reading this, Nora understood the Yazid victim link was now undeniable fact. Next, ballistics comparison. The Oregon State Forensic Firearms Lab conducted detailed matching between the Colt .32 seized at Yazid's home and the casing found with the body. Under electron microscope, technicians saw spiral rifling on the casing, absolutely matching the gun's barrel grooves. Results shown in 500x magnification technical photos, the report stated, Colt .32 faded serial from Spokane, Washington, is the firearm that discharged the bullet recovered from Rivergate scene. Match degree 100%. This was indisputable physical evidence, combined with the casing in the burial pit and skull bullet hole. The ballistics chain was fully closed. Third step, technicians restored old 1945 file photos. The black and white image of the Ford Sedan driver's door, originally showing faint prints, was reprocessed with new digital scanning technology. Unexpectedly, under faded silver reflection, the AFIS fingerprint system recovered two clear comparison points. Matching against Yazid's current prints yielded 11 characteristic points, exceeding the forensic minimum of 8. The report concluded, fingerprint recovered on victim's vehicle door belongs to Raymond Yazid, random match probability less than 1/1,000,000th. This meant, though time had nearly erased traces, the hand gripping the car door that night was finally identified. With all three evidence chains, biological, physical, and fingerprint, complete, Nora and her team spent days compiling the full file. On her desk, stacks included copies 2003 excavation records, 1945 scene photos, DNA results, ballistics analysis, fingerprint identification, Yazid's initial statement, and Morales's old interrogation. She felt the continuity of two investigation generations nearly 60 years apart, united by one goal. On May 21, 2003, the team submitted the final comprehensive report to the Oregon State Prosecutor's Office. The 268-page document, with 47 evidence items and 92 digital technical photos, divided into 4 parts. 1. Evidence and forensic analysis, including DNA, weapon, ballistics, textiles, and soil samples. 2. Witness documents, statements from gas station attendant Edward Grant, witness Helen Ward, and 1945 reports. 3. Identification analysis, fingerprint and technical image, cross-matching. 4. Investigation conclusion, determining criminal act, motive, and timing. In the conclusion, Nora wrote, male and female biological samples on handkerchief prove direct contact between suspect and victim at murder time. Ballistics from Colt, .3. 2. Absolutely match casing recovered at scene and in burial pit. Raymond Yazid's fingerprint matches faint print on victim's vehicle door. DNA from remains matches handkerchief DNA. Identifying Annie Lawson. All factors prove intentional murder and disposal. On May 23, the Oregon State Prosecutor's Office confirmed receipt of sufficient file. The record stated, unbroken evidence chain, no gaps, sufficient elements to prosecute first-degree murder under Oregon Revised Statutes 163.107. All evidence was resealed in specialized containers, red-stamped state evidence, Lawson Case 1945, 2003, and transferred to the state court evidence vault. That same afternoon, Nora visited the Rivergate area, now a modern container yard. She carried a copy of Inspector Morales's note and placed it on the railing overlooking the river. The words, handkerchief may be key in the future, were no longer a prediction. They had become complete truth. As she left the dock, her coat pocket held the newly printed file card, State for Raymond Yazid, evidence chain complete. In the investigation team's final internal log, Nora wrote, evidence chain complete. DNA, ballistics, fingerprints, and physical items form a closed, consistent system. File transferred to Oregon State Prosecutor's Office on May 23, 2003. The Annie Lawson case, after 58 years, has full legal grounds to proceed to trial. That night, leaving the office, she looked through the third-floor window of Portland Police Headquarters. Lights reflected off the opposite building, where Morales's old photo still hung in its wooden frame. 60 years later, every scattered fact he collected had merged into a perfect chain, a legal thread connecting past and present, ending the journey of Portland's most mysterious 20th century case. On August 10, 2003, the Multnomah County Superior Court officially opened the trial. State of Oregon vs. Raymond Yazid for Annie Lawson's 1945 death. Courtroom 4 was packed with reporters, law students, and residents who followed the cold case review program. On the Oregon State Prosecutor's table sat a nearly 200-page file stack, while opposite sat the silver-haired, frail 85-year-old defendant, silent between two court-appointed defense attorneys. When Judge Harold Pennington entered, the room instantly grew solemn. After opening procedures, lead prosecutor Mary Ann Colton began her opening statement. Today, we bring to light a case thought forever buried. Victim Annie Lawson, 21, was robbed of her life 58 years ago. Scientific evidence, modern progress, and the perseverance of those before us have brought us here. Colton presented events chronologically from the October 27, 1945 disappearance, Ford discovery at Rivergate, to the AL embroidered handkerchief and perfectly preserved evidence chain. She projected old scene photos and 2003 excavation images side by side on a large screen, showing the jury the astonishing match between Morales's descriptions and actual excavation results. Next, the prosecution called Detective Nora Lee to the witness stand to detail file reopening and DNA analysis. Nora described each step: unsealing, sampling, sending to Salem, dual DNA sequence matches, female victim, and male Raymond Yazid. She spoke calmly, decisively, her voice steady in the silent room. After Nora, the prosecution called Oregon State ballistics expert Patrick Mills to explain .32 casing comparison with the Colt seized at the suspect's home. He presented electron microscope images, pointing out each unique barrel rifling mark, stating, "This is the only gun-producing rifling fully matching the recovered casing." When asked about error possibility, he replied, "Virtually zero." Next evidence was the faint fingerprint recovered from the 1945 original photo. The digital technician explained AFI's software reconstruction and 11-point match with Yazid's current prints. Enlarged illustrations placed the two fingerprint patterns side by side, swirls perfectly aligned. The jury watched in silence. The prosecution concluded by summarizing: DNA, ballistics, fingerprints, witness statements, scene evidence, all pointed to one individual. After recess, the trial shifted to defense cross-examination. Court-appointed attorney Jonathan Price argued the evidence was too old, potentially contaminated by storage time. He emphasized, "We are prosecuting an 85-year-old man based on samples over half a century old, under uncontinuously verified preservation conditions. Can we trust no one touched that handkerchief in 58 years? He also objected to using old fingerprints because black and white film photos do not meet current legal standards. The prosecution countered with independent verification chains. Oregon State Forensic Lab and private Salem Lab confirmed no cross-contamination. The handkerchief was sealed with intact wax and Morales's clear signature, and 3 different evidence types matching eliminated all randomness. Colton stressed, if only one indicator matched, doubt could exist. But when all 3 paths lead to one person, truth is undeniable. When given the chance to speak, Raymond Yazid rose slowly. He scanned the room, voice hoarse and cold. "I don't remember that girl. I've lived too long for people to dig up the past. You can't try a ghost." The statement left the courtroom silent. Nora, in the front row, only bowed her head to her notebook, where she still kept Annie Lawson's small photo. The trial lasted 3 days. Over 20 witnesses were called, including forensic experts, the former gas station attendant, and analysis scientists. Each affirmed evidence integrity. The 12-person jury was asked to evaluate each evidence piece separately. On the 3rd day, they reviewed the casing images, DNA results, fingerprints, and Salem forensic report again. After hours of deliberation, they declared all analysis results valid and legally binding. In closing, Prosecutor Colton stood before the jury, voice firm but not harsh. For half a century, Annie Lawson was forgotten, but evidence was not. The killer's handprint remains on the car door, the bullet in the ground, the handkerchief holding truth. We seek justice for her, though late. She glanced at Yazid and continued, "The state of Oregon requests the maximum sentence under law, life without parole, per ORS 163.107, first-degree murder." Attorney Price weakly objected, citing his client's age and illness, but his argument faded in the tense atmosphere. When the judge announced recess for jury deliberation, Afternoon light streamed through large windows onto the victim's photo hung on the courtroom wall. The old image of Annie Lawson, in nursing uniform, seemed to look directly at the defendant, a symbol of justice being served, though nearly 6 decades late. At the end of the third day, Judge Pennington announced the trial would resume the next day for the official verdict. Before leaving, the prosecution reiterated the request. The state of Oregon seeks the maximum sentence. Nora stepped out of the courtroom into the crowded hall, taking a deep breath. Outside, Portland rain fell lightly, and she knew only one final step remained for Annie Lawson's justice to be fully closed. On the morning of August 14, 2003, the Raymond Yazid trial entered its final phase, sentencing. Multnomah County courtroom was more crowded than previous days. Reporters from the Oregonian, Seattle Times, and The Guardian were present. In the front row, Detective Nora Lee sat quietly, holding the leather notebook with all notes since file reopening. At the prosecution table, Mary Ann Colton organized documents, eyes calm but determined. Opposite, defendant Raymond Yazid was brought in wearing light gray prison garb, face gaunt, gaze distant. He said nothing, only clasped his aged hands on the table. Judge Harold Pennington entered, signaled all to rise, then summarized the case before yielding to the jury. He emphasized this was a special case, not just for its nearly 60-year span, but because it is a rare example showing justice, though delayed, can still be served. The room grew thick with tension as the 12 jury members entered. They had deliberated 7 hours since the previous afternoon. Each took their seat, faces serious. Jury foreperson Elaine Fisher stood, holding a white paper printed verdict form. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a final verdict?" Fisher replied firmly, "Yes, Your Honor, we have unanimously agreed. Please announce the result." She opened the paper, reading each word into the pin-drop silent room. The jury of Multnomah County Court find defendant Raymond Yazid guilty of first-degree murder under Oregon Revised Statutes 163.107, with constituting elements, including intentional, premeditated act, causing the death of victim Annie Lawson on October 27, 1945. The words ended. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Nora looked to the prosecution, seeing Colton nod slightly, while on the defense side, Yazid remained motionless. The judge gavels for order, then continued sentencing. He read slowly. Based on the jury's verdict, Multnomah County Superior Court sentences defendant Raymond Yazid to life imprisonment without parole, per Oregon law, for first-degree murder. Sentence execution begins today. He paused, then added gravely, 60 years cannot erase guilt, but neither can 60 years extinguish justice. Police escorted Yazid to stand. Asked if he wished final words, he only looked down, shaking his head slightly. A moment later, he lifted his head, saying weakly, but clearly, "I've lived longer than I deserved." No one responded. 2 officers led him from the courtroom in silence, handcuffs glinting under the lights. As the steel door closed, Judge Pennington declared the trial concluded. Prosecutor Colton turned to shake Nora's hand, whispering, "You delivered what Morales always hoped." Nora nodded, eyes misty. She pulled from her pocket a small paper copy of Inspector Frank Morales's note. "Handkerchief may be key in the future." She folded it carefully, placing it in her notebook as tribute to the predecessor. That afternoon, Portland police held a brief press conference at headquarters. The spokesperson officially announced the Annie Lawson case, opened in 1945, is now fully resolved. Suspect Raymond Yazid sentenced to life without parole. This is the longest-running case in agency history successfully solved. Reporters asked the key factor, and Nora answered briefly. A handkerchief. And the persistence of those who never gave up. File Case 45-103L was finalized. All evidence from the AL embroidered handkerchief, Colt 32 casings, to DNA records was packaged and transferred to state archives under new code. Solved Cold Case 45-103L, the Annie Lawson homicide. On the cover, besides the red seal, Nora handwritten, closed August 2003, justice served. At Portland PD, the old paper-filled investigation room was now fully digitized. On the server screen, the case's final status displayed: status closed, outcome solved, conviction secured. Sentence: life without parole. As the text appeared, Nora felt the city had repaid a debt. That evening, as Portland lights came on, Nora returned to the St. John's Bridge. Willamette River wind blew strong, lights reflecting off the water, creating a familiar yet strange scene. She stood near where Annie was last seen, looking toward the now modern port. In her mind, she heard Morales's voice, steady, slow, unrelenting. 60 years earlier, he believed truth would be found. And now, after 58 official years, the Lawson case was fully closed. In the internal record submitted August 16, 2003, Nora wrote, "Jury finds Raymond Yazid guilty of first-degree murder. Sentence: life without parole. Lawson case officially closed after 58 years. File transferred to solved cold case section." Below the line, she signed, Detective Nora Lee, then placed the notebook beside Annie Lawson's old photo. Outside, Portland rain fell steadily on the river, blending into autumn fog, as if washing away the city's old wound. But in the police archives, under warm yellow lights on file shelves, the AL embroidered handkerchief lay quietly, a symbol of justice delayed but complete. The story of the Annie Lawson case, a 1945 disappearance solved after nearly 60 years, is not just a criminal tragedy, but a profound reflection of perseverance, faith in justice, and the power of knowledge in modern American society. That an AL embroidered handkerchief, seemingly meaningless evidence, became the key, unlocking the entire case. Shows that in modern life, nothing is too small if properly preserved. It reminds us that every conscious act, however minor, can make a difference, just as Inspector Frank Morales carefully preserved evidence he knew might one day speak the truth. In today's America, facing challenges to trust and professional ethics, this story encourages maintaining integrity in work, never letting time or circumstances fade one's standards. Moreover, Detective Nora Lee's reopening of the file and use of DNA technology to restore justice for someone gone over half a century reflects a distinctly American spirit, belief in scientific progress, and societal self-improvement. In the digital age, where data and technology permeate every field, the Lawson case reminds us technology only matters when guided by humanity and community service. Ultimately, the 2003 Portland Victim Memorial was not just to close a case, but a reminder to every American citizen: justice is never late as long as someone is willing to seek it. Like that handkerchief, truth may be buried, but never vanishes. If you believe justice can arrive even after decades, please subscribe to the channel to join us in exploring more cases thought long asleep but still whispering truth. Thank you for following the Annie Lawson story. See you in the next video, where we continue the journey seeking justice for forgotten souls.